4:37. The Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz. The surface of the water remained absolutely calm. A light, motionless haze hung over the shipping corridor. Weather conditions were characterized by a dead calm. Monitoring beneath the surface at a depth of 200 feet, the guided missile cruiser USS Princeton followed its patrol route. It was moving along the southern edge of the transit corridor. On the surface, 3 nautical miles to the northeast, sailed the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, hull number CVN 72. The ship steadily maintained a course of 270. The flight deck remained empty. The Combat Information Center was fully manned. The crew was standing Condition 3 readiness. A routine watch turnover was underway as part of a standard Persian Gulf deployment. The threat board showed no factors requiring an elevation in readiness level. The situation changed at 4:41. A single passive contact appeared on the towed sonar array of the USS Princeton. The bearing to the target was 045. The signal was faint, but rhythmic. It matched the acoustic signature of a diesel-electric propulsion plant operating at bare steerageway on battery power. The acoustic signature was minimal, compressed into a narrow spectral band. The automated classification system tagged the signal as unidentified. The sonar technician on watch made the decision to issue a manual report. He keyed his headset and passed the data to the officer. Sonar holds new contact, designated Sierra 1-7, bearing 045. Target classification: probable submarine, low confidence. Estimated depth of the object: below the thermocline. The tactical action officer acknowledged the report. General quarters was not sounded. USS Princeton's combat systems remained at their current alert status. The contact was logged, and target tracking commenced. For the next 3 minutes, the sonar room maintained a normal operational environment. The only thing recorded was the rhythmic pulsing of the object, slowly moving at depth. At 4:44, the contact parameters crystallized. Signal processing algorithms detected a brief mechanical transient in the acoustic data array. It lasted for less than 2 seconds. That was enough to upgrade the target from a probable submarine to a confirmed subsurface contact. The signature matched a profile in the acoustic intelligence database. It was a Kilo-class submarine, Project 877 EKM. Under the Iranian Navy classification, it was designated as a Tareq-class boat. The acoustic characteristics of Tareq-class submarines were well documented. It is a Soviet-designed diesel-electric submarine delivered to Iran in the 1990s. It had undergone modernization, integrating Chinese fire control system components. It was also retrofitted with locally produced sonar modifications. When running on electric motors, it possessed exceptionally high acoustic stealth. Within a 20 nautical mile radius, the boat posed a severe threat. Right now, it was positioned directly inside the established maritime corridor through which the carrier strike group was transiting. The tactical action officer passed the contact data to the officer of the deck. The officer of the deck reported to the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. 90 seconds after confirmation, the data populated the screens of the strike group's Anti-Submarine Warfare commander. The contact was moving east-northeast at a speed of 4 knots. The target was at a depth of roughly 230 feet, assessed to be below the sonic layer. Its course intersected the projected track of the USS Abraham Lincoln. The gap was closing. The time was 4:48. The Anti-Submarine Warfare commander requested the deployment of a P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft. The aircraft was to be drawn from the detachment stationed at Al-Dhafra Air Base. The request was approved in under a minute. The aircraft was already airborne, executing a scheduled reconnaissance flight. It diverted south, heading straight for the contact zone. The sonobuoy rotary launchers were loaded, and the magnetic anomaly detector was spun up to combat mode. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, the airboss received a brief notification. The order directed the suspension of all non-essential flight operations. No further explanations were broadcast over the internal comms. The flight deck remained locked in pre-dawn stillness. The deck crews were at their stations. The fuel bozers sat idling. The catapults were not spooled up for launches. The time was 4:52. The sonar team on the USS Princeton detected a second transient from Sierra 1-7. It was longer in duration. For 4 seconds, a low-frequency mechanical noise was recorded. It perfectly matched the acoustic signature of a torpedo tube flooding. For the warfare specialists, this sound had only one interpretation. It was acoustic confirmation that a weapon was being prepped for employment. A weapon was loaded. On a tactical level, this was a critical escalation. Flooding the tube meant the sub was transitioning from passive observation to active weapon preparation. The outer muzzle doors hadn't been opened yet, and a final firing solution hadn't been locked in. However, the target's intent had changed. The spatial relationship between the vessels was no longer considered coincidental. The anti-submarine warfare commander issued the next order in a standard, measured tone. The threat warning condition was elevated to warning orange. An order was given to scramble the alert helicopter. An MH-60R Seahawk lifted off the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln at 4:54. It carried a crew of 4. The helo was equipped with a dipping sonar and a full combat payload of Mark 54 lightweight torpedoes. The aircraft climbed to 300 feet, executed a turn to the east, and quickly disappeared into the haze. The mission objective was absolute: localize, track, and hold Sierra 1 to 7 under continuous surveillance. The time was 4:57. The P-8 Poseidon arrived in the designated operational area. It descended to a patrol altitude of 600 feet above sea level. A drop of 12 DFAR sonobuoys was executed, deploying them in a crescent pattern around the contact zone. The buoys hit the water one after another. Each immediately began transmitting acoustic data back to the aircraft's onboard processing suite. The incoming telemetry corroborated the initial data from the USS Princeton. The contact was at a depth of 240 feet, with a current speed of 3 knots. Its heading had adjusted to 030. The submarine was slowing down and executing a left rudder turn. Tactically speaking, it was maneuvering into an attack angle. The time was 5:1. The MH-60R Seahawk's dipping sonar established direct contact. An active sonar ping was initiated. The return echo confirmed a range of 3,200 yards from the USS Abraham Lincoln's current position. The sub was sitting in the outer envelope of its weapons engagement zone. It hadn't yet crossed into the inner zone for a guaranteed high-probability kill. However, the distance had shrunk enough that the torpedo transit time was now minimal. The commanding officer of the USS Abraham Lincoln was notified accordingly. He arrived in the Combat Information Center at 5:02. The captain had already listened to the brief over a secure channel while in transit from his quarters. He required no further situation report. He studied the tactical display and evaluated the intercept geometry. The captain asked only one question regarding the status of the torpedo tube outer doors. The answer was negative. The ship's captain acknowledged the information. He took his seat at the center console and continued to monitor the screen. The watch team maintained the target track and continued calculating kinematic parameters. A strict, professional discipline was maintained in the room. Operators executed their duties without raised voices or sudden movements. The crew's actions reflected a precision honed through countless warfare exercises. The time was 5:04. A third transient was detected from contact Sierra 1 to 7. The acoustic profile was unmistakable. It was the slow mechanical grinding of outer torpedo tube doors opening. The sound of heavy metal machinery carried clearly through the water column. It was picked up by the USS Princeton's array with maximum clarity. 2 forward tubes were opening. The bearing remained constant. The weapons officer relayed the data to the anti-submarine warfare commander. He, in turn, instantly reported it to the captain. The order was given to keep weapons on safe and await the target's next move. The order was both procedural and tactical in nature. It was necessary to comply with rules of engagement prior to weapons release. Under the rules of engagement, the opening of tube doors by a hostile submarine was classified as a hostile act. The USS Abraham Lincoln now had the authority to employ weapons. The captain made the tactical decision to delay a kinetic response. The time was 5:06. The submarine's fire control sonar was detected going active. The ESM systems on the MH-60R Seahawk intercepted a brief acoustic pulse. It was a single, highly directional ping, focused directly on the carrier's hull. The sub was ranging the target and refining its firing solution. This active ping entirely clarified the tactical reality. Flooding the tube was preparation. Opening the doors demonstrated readiness. An active targeting ping meant a confirmed attack profile. The submarine had unequivocally declared its intentions. The captain issued the weapons release order in a standard level voice. The command was given to master arm and engage Sierra 1 to 7. The time was 5-7. The crew of the MH-60R Seahawk initiated their attack run. A single Mark 54 lightweight torpedo was dropped from a hover at 200 feet. The torpedo entered the water nominally and activated its onboard guidance system. It began a circular search pattern at a depth of 130 feet. The acoustic homing head acquired Sierra 1 to 7 within 11 seconds. The weapon dove to the assigned intercept depth and began its terminal run at 45 knots. Simultaneously, the cruiser USS Princeton launched a RUM-139VL ASROC anti-submarine missile. The rocket-thrown torpedo flew over the water on a ballistic trajectory, covering 9 nautical miles in under a minute. The second Mark 54 torpedo separated from its booster and entered the water. Its entry point was approximately 1,000 yards ahead of the sub's projected track. A dual-weapon, multi-axis engagement geometry had been established. This completely eliminated any possibility of an evasive maneuver by the target. At 5-8, the submarine began evasive maneuvering. The submarine's diesel-electric plant surged to maximum battery power. The boat executed a hard right rudder and initiated an emergency dive. Its acoustic signature spiked as countermeasures were deployed. A mobile acoustic decoy was launched. It replicated the sub's acoustic profile to draw the torpedoes away from the actual hull. The first Mark 54 torpedo momentarily locked onto the decoy. The homing seeker followed the false signature for about 4 seconds. Then, the onboard algorithm differentiated between the static jammer and the shifting Doppler profile of the submarine. The torpedo corrected its heading and resumed the intercept. The second Mark 54 was unaffected by the decoy. It had entered the water directly along the sub's path and was closing in from the bow angles. The submarine was caught in a pincer between 2 converging torpedoes, with no room to dive out of the kill box. At 5-9, impact was recorded. The first torpedo struck the engineering compartment in the aft section of the submarine. The detonation occurred deep underwater. No surface explosion or visible hull fragments were observed above the water. Acoustic sensors registered a high-energy concussive wave. This was followed by the sound of massive structural failure. The crumpling of internal bulkheads and rapid flooding of compartments were clearly recorded. The collapse of the pressure hull lasted approximately 14 seconds. The second torpedo reached the target 6 seconds after the first. Its homing system detected the structural deformation of the object. The proximity fuse triggered at a distance of 40 feet from the imploding hull. The secondary explosion accelerated the catastrophic structural collapse. Within 30 seconds, the acoustic signature of Sierra 1 to 7 vanished completely. The sonar displays registered only the sound of torn metal settling to the ocean floor. By 5:10, total acoustic silence had returned. The Combat Information Center aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln confirmed a target kill. The Anti-Submarine Warfare commander reported the cessation of all acoustic emissions. The P-8A Poseidon conducted a low-altitude pass over the kill zone. An oil slick and a cluster of metallic debris were visually confirmed on the surface. There were no signs of survivors. The captain acknowledged the report and sequentially issued 3 new orders. The order was given to return to standard patrol steaming. 5th Fleet Headquarters was immediately notified of the engagement. A combat air patrol was scrambled to defend against potential Iranian retaliatory actions. 2 F/A-18E Super Hornets launched from the deck within 4 minutes. They established a holding station at 25,000 feet, locking down the eastern approaches to the strait. Onboard radars conducted a continuous sweep of the horizon. No threats were detected. The time was 5:16. 5th Fleet Headquarters acknowledged receipt of the combat report. The transmission carried a top-secret classification. Access to the intelligence was restricted to CENTCOM Command, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the National Military Command Center. Within the hour, the data reached the Department of Defense. From a tactical standpoint, The intentions of the destroyed submarine were fully documented. It was positioned in an internationally recognized transit corridor and actively targeting a U.S. aircraft carrier. The outer doors were open, and the fire control sonar had emitted an active ping. The USS Abraham Lincoln responded to the imminent threat strictly within its operational authority. The hostile submarine was completely destroyed. The time was 5:23. Aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, the flight deck resumed operations. The deck crews moved with their standard, measured precision. Fuel handlers went back to work, and the catapult testing cycle began. Externally, there was zero indication of a recent kinetic strike against a subsurface target. In the Combat Information Center, a scheduled watch turnover took place. The officers who managed the engagement handed the deck over to the relief shift. Logs were finalized, and the objective sensor data was archived. Tactical displays reverted to standard patrol configurations. The only evidence of the incident was a secure entry in the ship's operational log under a combat engagement code. The time was 5:31. The MH-60R Seahawk made a routine landing on the carrier deck. The crew completed their post-flight procedures in standard operational fashion. The unexpended ordnance was returned to the ship's magazines. The dipping sonar was secured. The aircraft was powered down, and tide downs were attached. The time was 5:38. The sonar team on the USS Princeton conducted a final sweep of the sector. The surface oil slick was beginning to disperse. The debris field had entirely sunk beneath the waves. The thermocline remained stable, and the acoustic environment returned to baseline ambient noise. The time was 5:47. The USS Abraham Lincoln continued steaming west with no change in speed or heading. The strike group passed through the choke point of the Strait of Hormuz in a standard formation. No additional Iranian forces impeded the transit of the fleet. Commercial surface vessels went about their usual sea lanes. No aircraft approaches were detected from the coastline. The navigational environment in the strait remained entirely peaceful. The time was 6:02. The USS Abraham Lincoln crossed the western edge of the transit zone and entered the Gulf of Oman. The projected threat condition was downgraded. The Combat Information Center spun down to a standard readiness level. The Air Boss authorized the resumption of routine flight operations. Miles behind the strike group, at a depth of 650 feet, the remains of the Iranian Kilo-class submarine settled onto the floor of the Persian Gulf. The captain of the USS Abraham Lincoln remained in the CIC for another 40 minutes. He reviewed the engagement timeline and approved the draft after-action report. The captain and the Anti-Submarine Warfare commander discussed the tactics of the destroyed submarine. They noted the proficient management of battery resources to maintain acoustic stealth. The actions of the enemy crew were deemed tactically competent. However, they were insufficient to successfully execute the combat mission. In Tehran, Iranian Naval Command would soon register a loss of communication with the Tareq-class boat. The submarine had been operating under MCON with strictly scheduled communication windows. Missing a check-in time would trigger an internal alert. CENTCOM intelligence analysts began monitoring Iranian military radio nets. No public acknowledgement of the loss was expected from Iran. The submarine would simply be quietly stricken from the fleet's active roster. The parameters of tactical deterrence had been fully executed in exactly 22 minutes. Between 4:41 and 5:09 U.S. Navy forces completed a full kill chain on the target. The operation unfolded in strict accordance with combat management protocols. It proved the overwhelming effectiveness of current ASW doctrines and systems. The captain left the CIC, and the watch team carried on with their duties. Tactical displays hummed along in their standard cyclical refresh mode. The sun rose over the Gulf of Oman, illuminating the start of the morning flight ops on the carrier's deck. If you want to dive deeper into the tactics and technology of modern naval warfare, be sure to follow and subscribe.